Good afternoon, everyone. It is 1 o'clock Eastern Time, so we are going to go ahead and start our October WonderChat. Can you believe it's October already? So I'd like to welcome you to our WonderChat for October. My name is Missy Hicks. I am the co-founder of Wonders and Worries and the director of the Registered Wonders and Worries Provider Program. And I'm excited to present our topic today and have our speakers talk about children of adult patients, brief encounters with children and families. And as you know, if you were on last month, Kathleen McHugh and I set sort of the stage of some information about what is the impact on children when an adult has an illness and what are the things that we need to think about as we move through it. And then this month and next month, we'll be talking about direct interventions with children and families who are impacted by an adult's illness. And so this month, we'll be talking about the brief encounters. But before we start, I figured I'd do a couple little things of housekeeping. You know, your video are automatically muted. Your video is automatically muted and not on, and so is your audio when you enter. We will not use the chat feature, but we will use the question and answer. So that is at the bottom of your screen, or maybe it's at the top of yours. If you have a question, certainly type it in there. I'll be moderating those questions, so I may drop it in there and ask Crystal or Kaylee while we're talking through the presentation, or I may hold it till the end, but I'll be monitoring that. So we'll make sure that's attended to. The recorded webinar and any of the supplemental materials we might want to share with you will be posted to our website, usually by the weekend, but we say next week. That's on there. And then if there's audio or tech issues, I'll kind of be keeping an ear on that, but sometimes it's the personal Wi-Fi where you're at. So, but also know that I'll be keeping an ear out for that. We can go to the next. Evaluations are always appreciated. You will get an email tomorrow that will have a link to the evaluation, but also when you leave today's session, it will pop up, the evaluation will pop up. So we would love any feedback you have. We certainly look at that. I use it as we plan and move forward, share the information with speakers. So we really appreciate any of that feedback. So if you do the one that pops up today, you don't have to do the one tomorrow. You only need to do one, but we would appreciate one. As far as PDUs go, you're always welcome to listen at no charge for just professional growth and development. If you need a PDU, you can listen to the webinar today. You can click the QR code that will be at the end of our presentation and go to our website where you can purchase the post-assessment. It's a small nominal fee of $10, but if you purchase the post-assessment, you take that quiz and then you receive your PDU. The certificate will be emailed to you after you complete it. Go ahead. So now, I know this is what we're all here for, is the presentation, Brief Encounters with Children and Families. And we really wanted to talk this month about what happens when you have one time to talk to parents, or what happens when, you know, they call you to the ICU and because something's happened like imminently and you need to address it. You know, that's different. Obviously, we all know this, right? It's different than the opportunities that you have when you can see children and families multiple times over an extended period of time. So we really wanted to focus on brief encounters this month. And next month, we'll focus on sort of the more of those extended encounters with families. So I'm excited and thrilled and grateful to have Crystal Wilkins on with us today and Kaylee Furlow. Crystal is the Director of Programming for Operations at Wonders and Worries. If you've been on our Wonder Chats before, I'm sure you have seen Crystal as we've been walking through all these presentations. And she will be sharing with you some information about our the brief encounters that she has seen and worked with families at Wonders and Worries. Kaylee Furlow is at Vanderbilt University Medical Center, and she works in adult critical care and palliative care. And I'm thrilled to have Kaylee on here. She and I were talking earlier. It's so exciting that is her primary position. You know, and we're seeing some more of these, hopefully always more will grow, but we're seeing these positions crop up in adult institutions where there's a child life specialist providing these support services. So I'm thrilled to have Kaylee here to talk to us about that, because that's a different environment. You know, Wonders and Worries is community-based. She's in the hospital setting. So I think this will give you all a nice balance of brief encounters with children and families. So I'm going to turn it over to our speakers. I'll monitor the Q&A and I will talk to you at the end. Crystal?
Thanks, Missy. Excited to be back. I love our Wonder Chats, and I'm super excited for this topic in particular, primarily because at Wonders and Worries, this has been kind of a gap. Like, as we've started these Wonder Chats, Most of what we do is chronic care and long-term care, and so we haven't been talking a lot about those kind of one-offs is what we call them. When a family does come into our program, maybe does a parent consultation, but never does our full program. And so we haven't really talked a lot about that. So I'm excited to chat. Prior to my work at Wonders and Worries, I did work in the hospital setting and did a balance of acute care and chronic care. And so I have a high value for both and think that it's really important for us to recognize just the skills and expertise that we carry into each room or each call that we make. And the value of that for families, to be able to talk to someone with your level of professionalism and expertise, and that though we might have a list a mile long of things that we would love to do with that family, if we have one encounter with them, we can really impact what they do with their kids and how they support them. And so I don't ever want to minimize that. When I think about the work that I did in the ER, there were a million things I wish I could have done more. And yet, when I think about what that experience was probably like for the family, it was probably just right. And so for those of y'all that are working in acute care and where that's kind of the bread and butter of what you do, where you're doing these one-time encounters, it may feel like there's just so much more that you want to do, but what you're offering families is really impactful. At Wonders and Worries, like I said, we do primarily chronic care. From the beginning, we have operated from our 6-week model, and it was really what we tried to get families to do. So when we would meet with a family, talk to a family at the beginning of care, we were trying to get them to direct support. That was our goal. But what we have found historically is that probably about 50% of the families that we maybe talk to on the phone or get a referral from translate into a direct client care. And so I said that kind of weird, but a client that goes through our full program. And the other 50% might do a parent consultation with us on the phone, or they may even come in and do an intake, but then they don't follow through with long-term care. And how we kind of interpreted that initially was, well, that was a failure. Like, they didn't sign up for our 6-week program. And so what did we do wrong? How did we not convert them to a direct client? And we were introduced to this idea of brief therapy a few years back. And Meredith, one of our co-founders, had gone to a conference and heard this gentleman speak, Arnie Slive, who had written the book, When an Hour is All You Have, Effective Therapy for Walk-in Clients. And he was specifically doing some consultations for a therapy group here in Austin called Austin Child Guidance. And they were trying to get a walk-in clinic going in their therapy practice. And so he did some consultation with the team there and kind of guided them on how do you help a parent or a child in one session. And when we were processing things through, it was such a different kind of mind shift of, if a family does a parent consultation, does a parent intake, and then they go off and they don't sign up for our 6-week program, maybe it's because they got everything that they needed. And that was a completely different mind shift for us. And it was really helpful because at the time we were doing a randomized control trial where we were studying our curriculum. And we ended up having families that would they were randomly assigned to either our experimental group that was getting our curriculum right away. And then some families were waiting for 10 weeks. And that was a little bit unsettling for us clinically, of like, it felt like we were withholding things from them. And, but instead, that mind shift of, no, like, if we do a parent consultation, we're doing preventative care anyways. That's the mode of practice that we're in as child life specialists. If we give the parents what they need to have those conversations early on, and even if we're waiting 10 weeks, but giving them that curriculum later, that should be sufficient. And it was just a different way of thinking about things. And again, even for those families that didn't follow through with direct client care, being able to say, like, that they did get guidance on how to talk to their children about illness, about child development and how their child may be perceiving illness from their developmental lens, different activities they could be doing with their child to help foster communication and trust. And so we did give them that, and so maybe that's enough. And so that was happening, and then we were also talking to some different people in our community who were trying to serve some of our rural communities that didn't have access to direct point care because they couldn't get to us. And that's where the idea of our helpline came in. Could we do parent consultations by phone and give guidance to parents who were needing support but yet couldn't access us directly? And so again, we were kind of making that shift to could we do this? And ultimately, if you've heard anything from our WonderChats, we did. We shifted and we did the helpline, and we've been doing that for the last few years. And it was just kind of a different, like I said, mind shift for our staff. And so I'm going to shift to the next. Ooh, why is that not going? Oh, there it goes. Okay. And so 844-WE-WONDER is our lovely helpline, and that's Kim there taking a call. Actually, she's posing for taking the call. But when we started shifting to this mindset, like I said, we did a little bit of research. Meredith went to that conference. We consulted with Arnie's Live. We did some our due diligence of just looking into different articles that talked about parenting guidance, and actually our research partner at UT, Faria Phillips, when we were kind of wrestling with that feeling of are we withholding things from these families that don't get support right away, she said, no, actually you're providing what's most evidence-based. Right now we don't have evidence for your curriculum that it is beneficial for families, and so you're offering what is the most evidence-based with parenting consultation. We know that parent consultation and guiding parents on effective communication is helpful for children, and now we're researching your curriculum so that you can say this works, this is best. But at the time, prior to our research study, we didn't know how impactful our curriculum was. And so that was, again, another helpful piece of input and advice. And then we did some training with our team. We talked through these issues of feeling like, is it enough? Is it not enough? That sort of thing. And the wrestle that we have internally and professionally, and wanting to always do our due diligence and give families what they need. And we gave scripts for when they were answering phone calls, and kind of cheat sheets, so to speak, of these are the different things. Our team is very clinically savvy, but I think it was the pressure of, am I going to know everything on this spot? In terms of our assessment, it shifted a little bit with knowing when we were answering a phone call, we wanted to get to the meat of the subject right away. And so we wanted to be able to hear from the parent what their primary concern was for their child or related to their illness. And so our question typically was, tell me why you called today. Tell me what your primary concern is today that you would like me to help with. And that we usually always got there in our parent consultations prior to that, but we didn't necessarily go straight there. And so it helped us be maybe a little bit more direct, a little bit more proactive in like, hey, tell me what you need, and let's do that. Let's focus on that. And when we think intuitively about the work that we do as child life specialists, right, we naturally do that with kids, right? I'm not just going to prepare a kid for a CT scan by just walking in and being like, okay, this is all the things that you need to know. It's going to be conversational. It's going to be like, hey, tell me what you already know, and tell me what you're most concerned about. And so it's just applying what we naturally do with kids, but doing that with parents. And I think rather than kind of going around in circles, we were just going straight to, like, let's focus on what it is that you really were calling in for today. And then we implemented it and had opportunities for our staff to say like, oh, I got this call and I had no idea what to do. And so Kim and myself and Meredith were all available for support for our team as we branched into that. These are some of the common topics that, again, whether it was a parent consultation, it's the first phone call that we make when we're taking a new family from a referral, or it's a helpline call. These typically are the conversations that are happening. They're usually concerned about, how do I talk to my child about illness? How do I talk to my child about a pending loss if they have a terminal diagnosis? How do I manage my emotions related to talking about these things? How do I manage my child's emotions? How do I prepare for a pending hospitalization? How do I create a communication plan that's going to be helpful? And so all of these different things are usually the need when a family is calling in. And so these were the things that we built scripts off of for our team, that they know it like the back of their hand. They just wanted that for like a guardrail. And then, yeah, like I said, it was a shift in mindset of when is good enough good enough? And I think this is something our team is challenged by all the time. I think we're a lot of perfectionists, and so we always want to throw everything in the kitchen sink at a family, but that's not necessarily always the best, right? More isn't always better. And so recognizing that when families call in, they really do know often what they need. Sometimes they don't, but a lot of times they do. And so how can we provide intervention and support that's really directed at that need versus what we want and what we want for them, and really focusing on the need. This mind shift required us to really trust parents, to really focus on, I want to empower the parents versus enabling them. And so I have to trust that the guidance that I'm providing, the support that I am providing is, they can take that and then put that into practice. And so I needed to be able to trust parents, and I needed to help parents trust themselves. A lot of times the anxiety and the feelings that they're having is, I can't handle this, I can't do this. And a lot of the support that we provide is, yes, you can. Yes, you can. You have a relationship with your child trusts you, they know your heart. You know their quirks, you know how they have handled stressors in the past. And so you can do this, and we can do it together. I'm going to help you find the words, and then you'll be able to do that. Some of the values that kind of drove some of the decisions that we were making with offering this kind of support was we wanted to provide for the need. There were families that were not able to access us, that we wanted to be able to have access to us, even if it wasn't the full meal deal. Right? And we wanted to have an efficient practice. There are different things that we can do virtually and in parent consultation that allow us to see more families, even if it's not everything that we want to give them. And then it's kind of a dosing model of what is the need and how do I provide for that. And so some families, when they first call into us, whether it's, again, on a helpline call or a parent consultation, they'll need just a little bit of information, and then they'll want to check back in with us. And so they might call back to the helpline, or they might call back to us when something new happens. And so we do a lot of coaching on, when do you need to call back? Like what are some of the red flags that might be happening that your child isn't coping well? And or when are there certain things, changes maybe in your medical treatment plan that would require a check-in? And then when do you need to get them into direct support? Even if it's not with us, if it's a family that lives out in sticks out in the country, could they get in with a therapist that then we could provide collaboration with? We could coach them on the medical pieces that they maybe don't know, and get them into support that way. And so those were some of the values that guided what we did. And then I think this is, again, more guardrails for us to just know that we're doing everything that we can to support the family. Is we developed more resources. We wanted to be able to have tip sheets. We wanted to be able to have videos to showcase, this is the language that we use, these are the activities that we use, these are the ways that I engage children in communication, to be able to make it more tangible for families. And so that's one of the reasons why we've developed so many resources and put them on our website, is because we wanted to be able to have things to send and have things to link if we were sending resources and follow-up. And like I said, coaching parents on when to call back, and having the ability to either send referrals or have them think through, what are the resources in my community if they aren't near us where we know of those resources. And so anyways, sorry, I felt like I was a little all over the place, but hopefully hopefully that gives you an idea of how we are engaging in one-time encounters here at Wonders and Worries, and the things that we've talked about as a team that have been somewhat of a challenge for us, but I think it's made us better. I think it's made us definitely more efficient, definitely more capable of recognizing the good that we're doing and empowering parents for what they need to be doing for their kids. And yeah, So I'll leave you with that. I want to get you to Kaylee because she's got a robust presentation that has a lot of really great tangibles. So I'm going to pass the baton to her, and I'm going to step away for a second to plug in my, yes.
Can I just interrupt for 1 second before you step away?
Yes.
Can you talk about, just for a second, about how the helpline is staffed?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we have, it's staffed Monday through Thursday, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Central Standard Time, and we have each of our staff members who covers a shift. So Kim covers on Monday, Corinne covers on Tuesday, I cover on Wednesday, and Michelle covers on Thursday. So we have different staff members kind of jump into that, and we have our phone system is through Ring Central. And so I just can behind the scenes assign people to those different days. And then if people are out sick, then we just shuffle it around through Ring Central. But it's always a child life specialist that's on call to address those questions and answer them. And most of the time, sorry, it's been, we've ended up having more professionals call than parents, but it's available for both. And yeah.
Great.
So
thank you. I see you need to plug in. I'm going to let you switch.
I do need to plug in. But I'm going to get Kaylee to her slide and then duck away for a second.
Hey guys, or gals, or everybody. So I'm Kaylee. As they said, I work at Vanderbilt. And I wanted to give y'all just a brief idea of the amount of units that I cover and the type of units that I cover. I learn new things every day, because I cover all of these different units that are on here. So a lot of what I end up doing is end of life. And let me see if, I think Crystal's who's moving me to the next slide. But a lot of what I end up getting consulted for are the first time that children are going to be visiting an ICU unit. Thank you, Crystal. Anytime that families are needing help, support with talking or supporting their children or grandchildren. I work in all of our ICUs in our palliative unit, specifically with adults that have minors involved. So that could be a neighbor kid. It doesn't have to be their child. It doesn't have to be their grandchild. It could be the kid that they just happen to see every day in their neighborhood. A lot of what I do is end of life, like what I said. That brings in a lot of diagnostic teaching, because a lot of my families, this might be new, or maybe they've never talked about what's been going on with the dad or with the grandparent. Any concerns regarding children's coping, and then any like developmental information in regards to bereavements and modeling behavior. So those are the main things that I get consulted for. And we can go to the next slide again, Crystal.
I'm sorry, my computer is sticking a little bit. Hang on.
I know.
I know. It's not going right away.
If it shares to me, we can do that too, but.
Go. Sorry, y'all. I'll try to get it. Hang on, let me stop share for a second. And then let me try it again.
Technical difficulties of this world that we're in, guys. If it'll let me do it, that could work too.
Do you have it on your screen?
No.
Do you have the link? Okay.
Crystal, maybe if you share full screen, I think maybe that would help.
This is on full screen, or it's showing me on full screen as far as I can tell.
Okay.
Are you able to share, Missy? I don't know why it's doing that. Hang on. Oh. Okay, let me try one more time. Sorry, y'all.
I am no help here.
You're great. You are great. Okay. Is this the next slide you were wanting,
yes.
Kaylee? Okay. Let's try this again. All right.
Okay.
Hopefully it'll cooperate.
So it's interesting that Missy was just talking about Kathleen, because I have her quoted on here. So if you see the quote at the bottom, and I see this with my families all the time, they get this new diagnosis. Most of mine and a lot of what I'll be talking about today is end of life, or they've just learned that them or their spouse is dying, and their initial thoughts are, oh gosh, right? That what's happening here, and then they realize they're still my kids. Like what's going to happen with them? How do I tell them? How do I talk to them? And so in my role, ideally, in all the ideal situations that we don't always have, I would be able to meet with the caregiver first and assess what are their needs and what are their concerns and what are their goals with their kid. A lot of time what comes out of this is questions like this, where families are talking, I don't even know what to do. Sometimes they'll say, can you just talk to me? I don't even know what to ask. Is it wrong to let them see him like this, or is it right? And a lot of times they come in with their own experience, or I remember my cousin one time, they forced him or didn't allow him to see so-and-so, and it's always bothered him. So they come in with this story a lot of times that they've already experienced or heard about from other family members, and very much feel at a loss. We'll get questions like, how much information should I give? I don't want to worry them, so they're carrying this burden of doing too much or too little. Often in my situation, we get comments like, well, we told him we were coming to the hospital all week to see a friend who was very sick. And one time I had a family who it was the kid's dad, and the dad was in jail, and he didn't know that his dad was in jail. And so then we're trying to get around this whole story that wasn't honest, that they'd been saying all week. And trying to come up with language for how do we either rebuild trust, or is there a way to kind of get around that and still deliver honest, clear information? Or like, how do I tell them that daddy's not coming home? So those are a lot of the types of questions that I get and the weight that families are carrying. And what I've noticed over time, and probably a specific thing that I use super often within the first few minutes of talking to families, sometimes it comes up later, but it ends up being a great icebreaker, is really just bringing the humanity to the situation and saying, hey, the truth is that we're a bunch of adults who walk around all day, every day, and are trying to just cope with normal life. And then we get thrown stuff like this. And not only are we not supposed to know how to deal with it, we're also supposed to figure out how to help kids. And no one is supposed to know how to do that. And oftentimes that really just brings a lot of humanity into the situation. It really, sometimes families laugh. They're like, wait, hold on, I'm stressing about this. I'm not supposed to know how to do this. And a lot of times it just puts us on a ground where I can just say, hey, I'm here to support you. I'm a tool in your toolbox. I'm here to help you navigate. What is it that you're trying to move forward with your kids? What is it that you're trying to navigate and teach them about or help them understand or process through? And we'll go through, I'll ask them, like, what have y'all been talking about as a family? Going through different developmental concerns, just like each of you probably would. Giving them developmentally appropriate language, kind of walking through that whole, like, does your kid know the body part that's sick? Does your kid know what that thing does? Does, for a lot of mine, it's about end of life. So giving language and teaching about, we've tried all the things. We've tried the medicine, we've tried all the doctor machines, all the doctor procedures, and kind of walking them through language and how to talk with their kid. Even discussing things that they might see, like common responses that they might see from a kid if they're delivering this information. I had a little, not very long ago, a family who was super involved in wanting to talk to me. I'd gotten to meet them several months before, and the wife was dying, and they wanted help in having this conversation with their 3-year-old. And so one of the things that I kind of prepared them for is, once we teach this new word to him, he could forget, and you have to remind him regularly, but there's a chance that he's going to just start repeating it, and it might be in a way that you feel weird about. And very much that's what happened. We sat down and he learned, and we did medical play, And we went to see his mom, and he walked straight up to his mom and looked at her right in the face and said, "Mommy, you're dying." And repeated it probably 20 times in a 15-minute period, directly to them. But the family was prepared for it. They knew like how to validate what he was saying and talk about how Mommy right now can hug him. And so giving them all of these preparation and then assessing, is this something that you can do by yourself, or are you needing help? And what I find a lot, especially prior to COVID, I do a lot more, which I'm sure lots of you do too, a lot more just prepping parents now on how to handle or how to work with their kiddos. But prior to COVID, when we had a lot more movement in the hospital, a lot of families really wanted extra help. Even if it wasn't, even if I wasn't saying anything, they still wanted me present, in case there was a piece that they felt like they couldn't say, or they felt like they didn't say quite right and they needed support with. So in all of that, getting to a place of what else do you need help with? And kind of like Crystal was talking about with their hotline, like, is this something that we've empowered them enough and they're good, or do they need extra support? So a lot of our families do come back and do request extra support. They do want somebody to be present. They want their kids to at least come to the hospital. We spend a lot of time talking about how if we at least give kids the choice, that they tend to cope better, and that kids can make this choice from an educated standpoint. And a lot of families want to come to the hospital and sit down and learn a little more and want support with teaching just about diagnosis, but also end of life and providing choices in that. We can go to the next slide. If it will go.
I'm trying again, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I kind of have some of the stuff in the next slide in front of me, so even even if we can't get it there, that's okay. So the next slide is a kind of like a methodology layout of what I'm doing with families. Great, wonderful, thank you. And so, and I'm going to kind of give a case study, and this first part of this is I had a couple of days with this family, but the second part is this really quick interaction that we just figured out how to do. So in our ideal world, right, we would have all of the right situations, all of the right space, everything would be right. And so I had a family that came through our cardiovascular ICU. And it was a 35-year-old male with testicular cancer. I'm using my cheat sheet here so I don't forget anything, guys. He said he had bleomycin pulmonary toxicity. So just the treatment he was getting had damaged his body and damaged his lungs. He was on VV ECMO. He had renal failure and was on CRRT. And he was intubated and on a vent. So his entire bed was just surrounded, which I'm sure many of y'all have been in rooms like that. His entire bed had little spaces on each side that a family member could get into. And our hospital team wanted his family to be able to come and be present and just have a day together without talking about withdrawal, without talking about anything else, just a day together as a family. And this man is a divorced male, and he has a 9-year-old and a 7-year-old that is developmentally delayed. The 7-year-old functions somewhere between like 9 months and 2 years, depending on what we're talking about. But they have a great co-parenting relationship, which is what I was told on the front end, which I'm very thankful for, and it made this situation just very sweet for this family. So I'd had the luxury of talking with the mom of these children the day before on the phone, and she was asking questions. She was aware that we didn't have any more options for him. And she was asking questions about how to talk about that, but how to even talk about the hospital, was interested in them coming and having the choice to see him. And I was able to give her some language so she could start talking about medical stuff at home that night before. I was able to give her ideas for things that her daughter could bring to the hospital as a gift, or creating notes, and just kind of empower her that evening to begin preparing for them coming to the hospital the next day. When they did come to the hospital, we really got to kind of stick within this entire methodology. So we were able to find a safe space and sit with them. We used simple and honest age-appropriate language. The 9-year-old was aware of the medical equipment and aware of what her dad had. She knew that he had cancer. That's something they had been walking through together. And I just went into that a little more detailed, and we used preparation with photos. We did stage the room as much as you can in that to make it look as less threatening as we could. So we taught verbally, we taught with photos, we used age-appropriate language, and really, when we got to the end of it, her comment was, "Oh, this is less scary than I thought it was going to be." So it actually helped her feel more confident about going in the room to see him. And she was very clear on that that's what she wanted to do. She was super interactive. We did everything we could in this to try to create a child-controlled experience. So I gave her choices from like, even when you're walking up the hallway, we can turn around and decide we don't want to do that right now. When you get to the room, you could stay at the door. You could go look out the window. You could stand beside the bed and hold his hand. I showed her all the spaces that she could stand and what to watch for. It was a very thorough preparation. And she felt super confident about going in that room and about being present with him. In regards to the 7-year-old, we worked, her behaviors in the room, she had an iPad that she did engage with and watch. She chewed her iPad a lot. She did a lot of grasping and a lot of like grabs at things. So when we went to prepare her, the main thing that we did was just pull up a picture of Dad on the iPad and use very simple language in case there was anything that she could understand. And she definitely looked at the picture, which is why we used the iPad, because she's used to that. She definitely looked at the picture. She touched it. We said Daddy, made sure that she knew that that's who that was. And then we were able to do a bedside visit for the both of them, with the 9-year-old going first. And the 9-year-old was so confident. And I think this was one of the huge points in my career where I'm like, y'all, this works. And I know it does, but this is beautiful. She got to the room and walked in completely confident, found her a place to sit her gifts that she had for him, went over and hugged him, was very engaged with him, not scared of any of the environment. Showed all of her things that she'd prepared and brought for him. And so she was super empowered when she came there and was walking in that room, to be confident and to do what she needed to do in that space and to speak up when she was ready to step out. The 7-year-old, how we navigated that was that the mom just held her hands the whole time so she wouldn't be able to grab anything that she shouldn't grasp. And it was precious. She came in the room and she looked and she saw her dad and she knows her family. That has been very clear from the beginning. And she flopped her head down on the bed and just kind of laid there for a really long time looking towards him. And then he started going to sleep at some point, and she slapped his leg really hard and woke him up, and everybody kind of laughed. And it was just a very sweet and precious time with their family. And then the plan, they ended up, actually the oldest daughter ended up, we made space for her in the room so they could sit together and watch a movie together, which is something that they do all the time and regularly. And so it was a very ritual kind of thing for them to be able to do that. We did do legacy stuff that day, even though we weren't talking about end of life that day. We did legacy, we do embossed prints. I'll talk about those later, but we did some legacy items for them while they were there. and really just created a space for her to spend time with her dad as long as she was comfortable doing that. So we got her in the bed with all of his stuff in the bed. They watched a movie together, and it was just an absolute precious day. The next day, they were going to be coming back, and the mom was saying that she wanted to disclose this information. And so we talked about clear language. We had talked about really setting this up to empower them as a family unit. And they decided that they wanted, together with no one else around, to tell her. And the dad actually wanted to be able to tell her himself. So we had him aboard that he could ride on, and they partnered together. We had activities in there that she was already doing. So she probably painted 3 different paintings that day with him. And we set it up where he could be right next, they could be right next to each other. And while she was doing that, and then they disclosed together. And it was beautiful. All of the things were met, all of the developmental concerns, all of the things that could be ideal in our world to go right. Everything went right. But it was beautiful. They disclosed together. He is who told her that he was dying. I made sure that he knew that that was coming up in a few minutes, and to try to get some rest if he needed it. Like, we really just worked to create the situation that they needed as a family to do that. We can go to the next slide. This one. Okay, so I tend to like funny pictures, just in case y'all are wondering. So what about the situations that aren't ideal, right? So we have less time than that. You didn't get to talk with the parent first. They're just, everybody's right there, and right now's the time that the intervention has to happen. There's no quiet space. You're potentially, the last part says that you catch a family walking into a room with 2 young children. Everyone's emotional or angry that day. I cover our trauma unit, and we have a lot of, I think most of the situations I work with are highly emotional, but in the trauma unit, there tends to be a lot of anger as well, and frustration. And I think our COVID season probably has not helped that in any way, shape, or form. I'm watching my minutes. So what about when the situation isn't ideal and it's not right? And until the other day, I've focused on this situation in my career so much because it was so beautiful. It's just such a weird word to use for that, but when I watch how perfectly everything went, it has blown me away. And I forgot the second part of that family's interaction. And the second day, when all the family was starting to come because we were going to withdraw care, these families started walking very quickly straight to the room with 2 kids that were 9 and 8, and were just beelining it straight to the room. And if any of my colleagues would say, I'm a decently bold, like, will put myself out there person. And I like step in front of them and I'm like, hi, my name's Kaylee. I introduced myself and that I've been working with the family, and just very quickly asked them, do you mind if we take a few minutes to teach them about what they're going to see so they know what they're walking into? And the family was like, okay, just very like caught off guard. They were on a mission. They were on their way to the room. They brought their kids. They were ready to go. And we get to, I like leaned down in front of them and I said, hey, I don't want to take up a lot of your time, but I wanted to teach you really fast. So I walked through verbally what they would see, and they wanted to keep learning. So I walked through pictures and assessing at each picture like we always would. Is it okay if I go to the next one? And when we got to the end of it, I was like, okay, how are y'all feeling about this? And the 9-year-old boy was very confident and was like, I want to go see him. I'm ready. And I asked the girl, and she said, I don't know. And so the boy went in the room. Let him go ahead and go with his dad in the room. And I was like, okay, well, are we need to explain more? Are there any additional questions that you have? And she was like, no, I just don't know. And I was like, well, there's not a right or wrong. You get to choose. There's not a right or wrong. If you want to go in there, you go. If you don't, we can find you something else to do. You can write him a note. We can record a voice message for him. You can draw him a picture. And the mom was like, well, why don't you just come in here? And if you want to leave, you can leave. And the girl kind of stood there, and I was like, there's not a right or wrong, and was really being very kind of bold, but also really trying to empower her 8-year-old, who kept saying, I don't know. And I finally just said, hey, I have a coloring book with me. Is it okay with you if we just go color for a few minutes? And maybe we can re-talk about it in a few minutes and give it some time. And the girl was okay with that. Her mom was okay with it. We went to the waiting room, and we start coloring this picture. And Crystal, you can go to the next slide if you want. She probably got the cheeks, the nose, and the inside of the ears done. And she said, I don't want to see him like this in his hospital room. I want to see him at his funeral. And it was probably the most clear and direct statement that I've ever heard a kid make. And it just showed like the power of, 1, play and processing, 2, giving choices, and that sometimes if kids, and I think this is important for us to even work with parents on, like, let's empower them to choose. If they're not making a choice yet, let's just wait. Let's give it a little while. It doesn't hurt anything to wait. Do we have the option of a play opportunity or a little bit to rest and think? And so we can go to the next slide again. So thank you. I'm glad this is working better now. So one of the things that we were kind of talking about before doing this presentation was, well, what are the, in a lot of the situations I'm in, even when families are just very stressed, a lot of times we need like the quick assessment questions, because I'm trying not to overwhelm them. A lot of them I'm just meeting in the midst of their trauma. I'm not meeting them earlier on. So some of the, Crystal and them were really wanting some of these quick assessment questions that I use. And I would love if y'all wanted to type in some of the quick assessment questions that y'all use as well. It's always helpful for me too, but for me, when I'm talking with parents, a lot of times, like I said earlier, I'll say, so what have you been talking about as a family, or what do your kids already know or understand? And normally I can get a pretty good idea of what the family's needing support with, as well as what their kids already know. Another thing is there anything you're trying to talk about with your kids that I can help you navigate? Especially if our families are super, super stressed and really long conversations with them isn't happening right now, but to just ask them that, is there a specific thing that you're trying to navigate that I can help you with today? And then if I can come back another time, I will. And then in talking with kids, kind of like in the hallway, I squatted down in front of them, and it was in the hallway. I think I forgot to say this part. We were in a hallway with like 20 or 30 people around. It was loud. It was not ideal. There was nothing ideal about it. There were lots of things that they could get distracted with. And I just looked at them and I was like, hey guys, I probably even put my hands in front of my face like this. And was like, I know that there's a lot going on. I want to make sure you know what you're walking into. Can you tell me, what do you already know? And just so I'm not teaching you something that you already know. And then we learned and walked through everything. And then a lot of times I'll ask, is this something that you've been around before? And they might elaborate or tell me if it's something that seems weird to them, or they've done this a lot and it's comfortable to them. And a lot of times that helps me even navigate how much am I needing to teach if I only have this amount of time to get them in this space. I run into that a lot in our trauma unit specifically. At any point, the team can shut me down from coming in. And the kids can't come in unless I'm there. So we have my schedule, and then we have anybody that's coming through the trauma unit. If we're getting new admissions, if they have to do a procedure, it's all open bay. And so a lot of times we might only have 10 minutes to teach, and I need to get everything about the unit, as well as the patient, as well as their coping. So a lot of times these questions kind of help me narrow down how much am I needing to teach, how much have they already experienced before, and it's really helpful for me. Next slide. Advocating. So you might have noticed that for me, kind of stopping myself in front of a family, like putting myself in front of a family and trying to get their attention, or speaking up and saying, actually, it's really just your choice. There's not a right or wrong. That is a decently comfortable thing for me. That's part of my personality and temperament, but that might not be everybody's. That might not be the thing that you're super comfortable with. So we were talking about this before presenting, to maybe touch base and on how do I go about that and kind of what's my thought process. So for me, I think it's really important to remember that families, one, are doing the best that they know, but they might not know other options, and they might not know that child life services are a choice. And so this family coming up the hallway, they probably hadn't talked to the girl's mom that I was working with. A lot of the families come in and they have these family experiences or things that they have, like this whole idea in their head of, we're going to take them, if they have the right to see him before, they need to say their goodbyes, they need to have this, or we're not bringing them. So we don't want this to be their last view of this person. So just I think one thing is to keep in mind that families don't necessarily know how to do this. They're doing the best that they know how. They might not know that there are other ways or other options. They are just working with what their experience is and what they've thought in their head so far. One of the things that's huge for me that has been very helpful is always providing choices. So providing choices for their kids is showing respect to their kid. So even in the scenario of me saying, actually, there's not a right or wrong. We could go and sit in the waiting room. Is that okay with you? And I'm providing a choice for their kid as well as for them. And then use what we know about children in development. We know that kids can make these choices. We know that if we empower kids, that they can act on their environment in a way that they're comfortable with. We see it every time we prep a kid for a procedure. If we give them choices, I used to work in an ED, and so I sat in the ED before and said, okay, so we're going to need your body to stay still. Do you think that you can do that by yourself? Or do you think you're going to need help? Oh, I need help. Well, do you just need help with your arm, or do you need help with your whole body? And kids can make these choices, and it's helpful for them. And so really just going by what we know about children and development, and talking and promoting empowering children and empowering them by teaching them and giving them choice, so they can act on what they need. And the truth is that as adults, and I say this to parents all the time, as adults, we are figuring out how to cope. And now we have kids, like we were talking about earlier, and this might be their first opportunity or first experience with grief. And so we don't know how they cope with that. And so this is the opportunity to provide choice and to empower them and give them options. And sometimes the kid might have their own idea, but sometimes they need options and choices. And then we learn what helps them through that process. And that's also something that I talk to kids about. I will even, especially when working with teens and school-aged kids, tell them, your parents, just like you don't know how to do this, your parents aren't supposed to know how to do this, and they're not supposed to know how to help you. So I want to encourage you to speak up. If you know something is helping you, tell them. If it's not helping you, tell them it's not helping you. And really just empowering them, empowering their parents, and putting humanity into the situation, that this is hard, that nobody's supposed to know how to do it, and how can we communicate and talk to each other to make this, to learn how we're going to walk through these kind of situations and walk through them together and by ourselves. So I think that's the end of my stuff, right? Oh, no, it's not. Forgot. So as far, we were talking about like what kind of quick legacy things do I do? These yellow and blue handprints are actually the ones from that family that I was talking about. They were Michigan fans. And so that's actually from them. So our hospital a while back switched, and as much as we can, we try to do embossed prints instead of molds. That does not mean that that's happening everywhere, but I think it was a goal, because they're quick. They're done when the moment we do them, they're done. We can hand them over to families, so we're not responsible for them. We're not waiting an hour for them to finish. So that's something that I do a lot with families because it's quick. I also do thumb impressions, which is what the picture on the right is. I used to use Model Magic for that, but it tends to break. So I started using air dry clay, and that has been a great resource, and it's quick and it's easy. I put it in a dental cup and I send it with the families. And then another thing that I've been using a lot with our older kids, I had a 16-year-old girl come to me, and her mom's name is actually Kaylee as well, and she used to be a child life specialist, and she was dying, and the husband had been just like getting all the information, and the daughter requested to speak with me one day and was talking about her future and mom not being there. And I was like, well, your mom's still alert right now. Why don't you go ask her all of her favorite things, and then you can incorporate that into something later, or you can choose that you don't like her favorite color and you don't want that incorporated, but you'll always have that. And ask her. She'd been asking her questions that she might want to know the answer to later. And so we really just transformed that into this favorite list thing as well. That's kind of quick and easy for the family to do. It's also a talking conversation for all of them. Even if the patient isn't able to, they can all talk together and come up with what those things were and what they all remember. So those are a lot of the like quick things that I have been encouraging families to do, as well as providing for families in these quicker interactions. And thanks for having me.
Thank you, Kaylee, and Crystal both. I have a question here. I'm going to just tell everyone that I know that we're getting close to the end, so this was sort of perfect timing. But on this last slide here, I do have the QR code for the post-assessment for the PDU certificate. There's another link for the feedback if you would like to do that. But again, that will pop up when you leave the meeting. I wanted to just let you know that our next webinar will be November 20th. And that is about those extended support opportunities with families. So we will be discussing that, the third part of this 3-part series. So I want to invite you all to return for that. And one final thing I wanted to let you know, and then I'm going to go to these questions for Kaylee. So stick around. And if you have any more questions, go ahead and type those in the box. But we do have our Registered Wonders and Worries provider training coming up November 9, 10, and 11. We are doing that synchronously online, so we'll be there the 3 days together. So it offers 20 hours of PDUs for that initial training, and then support as a registered provider to help you with your practice, with individual consultation and group support. Happy to talk to you about that offline. So if you have any questions about our registered provider program, please shoot me an email or check out our website about that. But we are excited about being able to offer that training, even though we can't be in person. We are still going to offer that for those 3 days. So if anyone's interested, please reach out. Kaylee, I'm going to jump to you with a question. Kim asked, have you ever had the opportunity to prepare children who were not able to see or be present with the patient because they're a COVID positive adult? And so what tips might you have regarding that? Or, what did you use? What would you recommend?
Okay. So I do cover our COVID unit. I have not been going into it as of now. That doesn't mean that I might not have to. So have I had the opportunity to prepare children who can't see a COVID positive adult, correct?
Right. So if you're preparing the child that the patient was dying, but the child couldn't be in the room or go in to say goodbye or anything like that.
I have not. So I will say that when we first were on lockdown, they were not allowing any children in, even at end of life, and I was really having to advocate for that. What has happened since then is I have gone to our management and leadership and advocated that we let children come in at end of life. That seemed like important, and what was happening was different units were doing different things, and some were sneaking kids in and some were saying no, and so it became this ordeal. And so we got them approved to be here at end of life and to not have to like there's only 3 people allowed, and so they're not a part of that 3. So specifically in our COVID unit, I have not heard of kids trying to come at end of life. I could have missed something. I'm not on their unit like I am on my other units. I have talked to families outside of the COVID unit with their kids and just through coping, but their parent wasn't dying. So I haven't had that happen. I did do a lot of telehealth, or I guess like Zoom calls with families for a while. So I did have a dad and his daughter on FaceTime one day. And the mom was dying at the hospital. And so we had worked that way, and I empowered her a lot. During that conversation, I made sure she knew what was going on and what she would see. And I asked her if she wanted me to take her in there, if she wanted legacy stuff. So I was asking her, do you want to watch me do that so you can be a part of it, or do you want me to do it with you separate? So I think there's huge power in choices. Even if we're not able to have a kid there at the bedside, the more choices we can provide, even if they don't seem like that big of a deal, is huge. And this particular girl did not want to watch it being made. She just wanted to see it when it was done. And so I sent it to her. But we have done a lot of just Zoom chats where I'm supporting families that way. So there have been 2 or 3 different bereavements that I've done where the interactions were over Zoom. And that they weren't even COVID patients. We just weren't allowed to have anybody in the hospital. So
Right.
Thanks for asking that question. I wish I had that specific scenario, but I haven't.
Thank you. Crystal, was there anything you wanted to add about that or no? Okay. So it looks like that's it, unless there's any further questions. Thank you both so much, Kaylee, Crystal. Thank you for sharing your experience with these brief encounters. Because I think what you've done, especially for me, was to normalize that. Like, we know sometimes things aren't ideal. We all know that, right? But things aren't ideal. But what we can do is what we can do. And I love that. When is enough? And what we can give them is that piece of information that they can use in the moment, the most important thing to them. Always important assessment questions, right? Like what is important to you right now, not what I think is important to you. And so I think that those are definitely things that can help normalize sort of a less than ideal situation when you don't have it for all of us. So I appreciate both of your expertise. I appreciate your time, and I appreciate our colleagues for joining us today. I hope that we will see everyone. Oh wait, hold on. There's one more question. I hope we'll see everyone soon. Let me ask this one real quick. Last minute. How do you keep this job sustainable? So it's interesting. I'm thinking that you mean, Kaylee, with the adult position. Type in if that's not what you mean. But I had jotted that down in case we needed a question at the end. What are sort of the gifts and challenges of working on an adult unit, like as your primary position? You want to take a second and maybe respond to that for us, Kaylee?
Yes. And when we say sustainable, we're just talking about like how to like emotionally sustainable. Is that accurate? I'm watching your answers. So is that what y'all are hearing?
I'm thinking that they mean, I didn't know.
Or are they meaning financially sustainable?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking it means. Maybe you can address both, right? Could you address both?
I can try.
Answer it all, Kaylee.
Answer every question. So financially, I am funded by our adult hospital by a lady who I consider one of my bosses, even though she doesn't do any of my eval stuff. And she is very pro child life, and it gives me, I was talking to Melissa, she has me this lovely office that I absolutely like love. It has storage and everything. So I am fortunate. I think our hospital is fortunate to have the support and belief, emotional burnout. Okay. The support and belief in what I do over here. And if I'm honest, I'm supported by all of our teams. Like every unit I go to, I think there's about 2 nurses ever that I've ran into that are not helpful anytime I ask a question. But other than that, like they want me there. They want my presence. They want to partner with me. They want to learn. They want the best for our patients and families. And I think it is just very accepted over here to have me here. So the adult hospital funds me. As far as like emotional and burnout, I think we're all different, right? We all cope differently. The way we all approach our work is different. So for me, I have lots of things that I do that are helpful. I stay active. Before COVID, I danced. It was the best. I'm very faith-based, so I have a lot of that really helps me with coping. But that being said, I went through this a lot in the last year. For the first time, I had a situation that really messed with me. And I didn't know it at first, but I ended up kind of frantic anytime it would come up, and then I was trying not to work and trying to it was just very weird, and it was weird for me. My trauma threshold is way up here, and but it was the first time that I guess had created a story in my own head and did have to go to therapy for that. But I was thinking through, because of that situation, I started thinking through, well, what have I done in the past that's helped me? Like, why did it take all the way up to here? And a lot of it dealt with the way I view my work, and that I view my job as my job, and it is in its own box. And some people might say that's bad. I ask my therapist about it all the time, and she said, no, this is how you survive this stuff. Like, my job is my job. And when I come to work, I'm using my job energy and the skills that I have that I've gained or were blessed with naturally, and I'm using those for the purposes of my job. And when I leave, then that ends. And now my job, when I go home, is to take care of me and to be involved with my community and be involved with the things. So I have a very clear boundary in the way that I view my work as I'm doing my work. I don't know, that might sound crazy to somebody else, but I was trying to figure out, why have I been okay this whole time? And why did this thing create a problem for me? So, but I believe in therapy, and I used EMDR for it because it was hard. So.
Well, and I appreciate your honesty on that. And it's interesting. And Crystal, I don't know if you want to add something in a second, but I was just actually had a question about this last week, saying that when you work in this arena, the children of adult patient arena, it does present different issues, because sometimes, these people are our peers. So in your mind, those are the things you have to think through, like, oh gosh, she has a 16-year-old like I do, or this, and I think that makes sort of not more, but especially important to be able to do what works for you. And I agree, for me, I need to keep that separate. Like, that might be their experience, and this is sort of my experience, but it does create a different challenge, I think, with that part of it, because you can identify a little more. We try not to, and we try to keep that separate, but we're all human, right? And you can't really change that. Crystal, was there anything you wanted to add about that before we?
No, I love the question. That's its own WonderChat, right? We need to do one on self-care and burnout. But I think the main thing is just self-awareness, as Kaylee said, of just being aware of what your tipping points are, what you do to cope typically, and then what are the signals or symptoms that you aren't coping well, I think is really important. And that's something for me that when I know that I'm starting to experience compassion fatigue, it's usually the same things. Like I start to skirt on boundaries, and I start to do X, Y, and Z behavior. And so just being aware of those little tipping signals, I think, are really important, and then dialing in the care that you need. And so I also go to therapy, love it. And I had a couple at my church who they always talk about preventative care, and on their anniversary, they always go to a couples counseling session, which I thought was like brilliant, and like, that's not how I'd want to spend my anniversary, but you do you. So, but I just thought that was really interesting to think about in this work. I think it's not if burnout is going to happen, but when. I do think that it's just one of those things that, because of the amount of trauma that we experience, it's probably likely. And so to be able to tune into those things and to care for yourself in the ways that you need to. But I think at Wonders and Worries, the best gift that we have is just each other, and being able to create a team dynamic that fosters trust and being able to talk through things. So that's also really helpful. We consider our team like a family, and that's really a blessing. So
great. Well, thank you all very much. Again, thank you everyone for attending. I just want to be sure, I'm going to go on to the evaluation website. If there wasn't the choice for this one, then go ahead and just choose last month's and I'll see where it was, but I'm going to add the choice. We usually have to choose which evaluation which WonderChat we're evaluating, so I want to make sure that that's in there. Again, thank you all for joining us today. Thanks to our speakers, and we will look forward to seeing you in the future. Thank you.